Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for the Big Data and AI webinar series. If this is your first time joining us, we here at the Big Data and AI team are committed to bringing educational content to the space. These webinars, we discuss strategies, solutions, and emerging technologies for your teams. If you're interested in viewing any of our past webinars, please head to bigdata-toronto.com. So before we get started, we actually have a very special announcement, and that's our fall conference, the Big Data and AI Toronto Conference, that's co-located with the Cloud Expo and Cybersecurity Conference, will be taking place on September 29th and 30th, and it's going to be a hybrid event. So the event will be taking place in person, and the same content and experience that are offered in person will also be offered virtually. So when registering for the conference, you can register to attend and join us in person at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre, or to view and participate from your home or your office. So we're really excited for this new hybrid event. We hope that you can join us. If you'd like to learn more about the conference or to register to attend, you can go and visit bigdata-toronto.com. So today's webinar, we are going to be discussing digital transformations and the digital transformation roadmaps. Our speakers today are Michael Roberts, practice lead from Newcomp Analytics, and Anuj Katiyal from Condé Nast, who's a data scientist there. If you have any questions for our presenters, please put these questions in the Q&A tab that's located to the right of the screen. We ask that you please don't put your questions in the chat tab because we may not see them and therefore we may not get to them. So just make sure they're in the Q&A tab. We won't be taking any breaks today. We'll be going straight through to 2:45, but this webinar is recorded. The link to the webinar recording, as well as survey for the webinar, will be sent to all registrants tomorrow after the webinar has concluded. So thank you all again for attending and being with us here today. And we are going to pass things along to our first presenter, Michael Roberts. Mike, how you doing?
Very well, thanks. How's everyone today?
I think everyone's good. So I'm going to let you take things off.
Okay, thank you. So today we'll be discussing building an analytics roadmap. So this is a service that my company and personally I've delivered for many years. Basically, when a company starts out on a data science or an analytics journey, it's good for them to have a plan. They shouldn't approach it sort of haphazardly. But the question becomes, how do we set up the plan? What sort of questions should be asked? What sponsors or participants should be consulted? So the purpose of this presentation is to kind of review some of the agendas that you put together and some of the topics and questions that you might ask as part of a roadmap, and the kinds of topics and information that you would gather. So just a little bit about Newcomp. Newcomp is a consulting firm, and we have a number of technology partners that are shown here on this slide. IBM and Microsoft, as well as Tableau and Alteryx being some of the key ones. What we've done basically is look at the solutions that have worked best for our clients since the late 90s, and have kept the ones that have really worked well and have been good solutions, and those are the ones that we carry forward. So many times we're also using open source technologies for first-of-a-kind solutions, but these are in general the types of things that we're using to help our companies on their our clients on their analytics vision. So when you're conducting a roadmap, sometimes it's a good idea to provide an overview, especially if the audience that you'll be addressing has different levels of technical skills. If it's a range of business analysts and sponsors and BI developers, it's not fair to assume everybody has the same base level of understanding, especially if they specialize in one area. So just a general overview of analytics is sometimes useful. So something like this, where people understand that the whole goal here is to get clean, dependable data, set up a reliable information management system that can pull that data together and support the development of conclusions, graphics, and visual analytics that ultimately will help a company become more data-driven and support better decision-making. So it's good if you're conducting a roadmap to start off with some sort of a high-level overview, including some of these core principles that you can review with the participants. It's good to have a particular goal in mind. You have to stress the importance of having good quality data, otherwise you might be misled by your solutions. Being skeptical if you shouldn't take the insights that are first uncovered and immediately implement them. They should be subject to some scrutiny and some question and things like that. And just some of these core principles are very useful to review with an audience before starting on a roadmap. It's also good to review some of the obstacles that can be confront us when we're building an analytics solution or data science solution. Data being disconnected, lack of standards, maybe lack of some skills or training within the team, or misalignment between what the business wants and what the technology investments have been in the past. So these are things to kind of acknowledge and understand. And then we can also move into a more detailed view about sort of processes or how things are measured, organizational challenges. Not all of these will apply to every business, but they're kind of listed here as discussion points to kind of get people talking about, what might challenge a company that's embarking on an analytics journey and is trying to establish a roadmap. It's also useful to look at the planned architecture that you could potentially have in place, understanding your source systems, generally what you have available for data warehousing, or might consider the types of applications that are in scope for your business. So in this particular diagram, we have planning applications and reporting applications, what will be presented and to whom. So understanding basically from left to right, the source data through to the processing and storage of the information through to the presentation, and reviewing that, this intention with your audience is useful. It's also good to look at previous successes, identifying the things that have made other projects successful and what makes roadmaps important, making sure you know who your sponsors are, making sure that you have a partner for education or for technical assistance. Making sure that people are understanding that putting a magnifying glass on your data might cause uncomfortable questions or uncover some problems that will need to be addressed, but in a constructive way. One of the key metrics for a roadmap is to help drive user adoption. Many companies have implemented solutions that are poorly adopted because they've taken a one-size-fits-all approach. Maybe they've had one scorecard that went to executives as well as to detail line of business users. And because of that approach, the overall adoption isn't as deep as it should be. So making sure that we understand that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this, making sure we know which users or indicative samples of the user community to involve is also key to being successful. So with respect to developing a roadmap itself, the best way to do this is to make sure that your agenda is well understood up front. So this is typically best done if you define the sessions up front, if you know which attendees are going to be required for each of the session and what topics will be covered. That way you can plan the sessions. Having done many of these, it's not possible to run these back to back to back. You sometimes need 2, 3, or weeks or even longer for some of the government clients, or if travel is required, to plan out the sessions, the attendees, and the topics that will be covered. But in general, these are some examples of the kinds of things that you might want to cover in the kinds of sessions. So the first would be some sort of kickoff with the sponsor. So this would be in keeping with a top-down approach where we're going to understand what the sponsor's vision is for analytics or for data science or for information management at their particular business. So we would understand the key objectives, sort of their expectations for timelines and goals, also guidelines and guardrails. So for example, if the company has a large investment in a particular system that is also known to be problematic, it's useful to know if that's something that simply was out of the question to change, so that we can avoid suggesting that in the recommendations, to sort of acknowledge that that's just like something that will stay put for the time being. It's good to understand what the sponsors think of the company's maturity in terms of people, processes, technology, and data, things like that. And just make sure that you review the rest of the agenda with the sponsors so they know what the time commitments are, who's involved, just in case you miss somebody or there's someone that should be added to the roadmap. Again, the sponsors here would be the attendees would be your sponsors and any key facilitators that you're going to need to conduct the rest of the roadmap. So once you've met with the sponsors, the next thing to do will meet with the various project teams. So make sure that they understand, you can get an understanding of how things work in the current state so that you have a little bit of an education. If you already have this, you can skip this step. In some cases, it's useful to send out a questionnaire about what are the most commonly used assets or the common challenges or things that work really well today. So in the previous session, we started out with like a top-down approach, and here we're switching to a bit of a bottom-up approach to see, not so much what the vision is for the company, but what's actually happening in today's environment on a day-to-day basis. So once we've met with the project teams, then to conduct a good roadmap, we have to understand methodologies and IT standards that are part of a business so that we can make our recommendations kind of fit with existing practices, accepted practices. So one thing to understand is how businesses capture requirements. So in this case, we have a session to review project methodologies and standards. The attendees are BSAs, if the company has them, or project managers that have run a number of projects. But here the goal is to understand what's the process that the company uses to capture requirements. Is there a review and sign-off process? How do we avoid duplication of efforts? In terms of what's in place today, what standards were in place when it was constructed? Are there preferred vendors, project management approaches, or cloud vendors such as Microsoft or AWS? And what practices are followed? So we understand at the end of this kind of like how the company does things in practice and historically. And then you can start to ask some topics, discussion topics like, why don't we already have a single version of the truth? And just kind of see how the group works together and kind of review what their thoughts are about data challenges in the past. The next thing to understand once you have a vision from the sponsors and an understanding of how things are done in the current state is to go over the environment, to start to look at areas that have challenges, or maybe there's duplication, or have manual processes, or generally in some way problematic or could be optimized. So we can look at the BI and data warehouse assets first, making sure that we understand what kinds of questions are generally considered to be most critical, what are the systems being used to answer, what kinds of issues are there, data quality issues in particular about inventory or sales or financial, other kinds of data from CRM or HRIS systems, what's the cause of the issue. And go through and understand what exactly is the warehouse, data warehouse and BI solutions, assuming the company has it in place, or other data assets being used for, and what challenges might exist. It's also useful to understand the data flow of the system and understand where errors may be introduced. And again, we can have a discussion topic. We can get this group's opinion of the maturity of the people, processes, technology, and data that are involved in the data warehouse and data asset solution. From there, we can start to look at user-facing assets. As I said, one of the common challenges to the deployments is that people kind of have a one-size-fits-all approach, or maybe have deployed a self-service tool without any sort of supporting analytics, like pre-built content. Maybe they don't have someone trained or who feels responsible for maintaining or updating content, things like that. So understanding what the current data assets, and these are commonly things like cubes and dashboards and reports, making sure that we know what's in place and what they're used for. Some cases, companies may have real-time reporting requirements, places like call centers or a manufacturing process, or where historical data is of really little value, and in these dashboards, and we need to have truly real-time information, again, to make decisions or to understand staffing levels or if SLAs are being met. So this is a good, important area to understand, because it can have a big impact on your data warehouse architecture, meaning that you need a Lambda architecture that can take batch-based updates as well as streaming information, and get a sense of what's required there. Some solutions are purely directional. We can also take a look at current problems with the system. These sort of fall into these broad categories of performance problems. So the system is slow or unavailable, maintainability issues. People are scared to change it for fear of breaking it, or the person that made it has left, and now they're kind of stuck with the solution. Or functionality gaps. Maybe it doesn't drill down to the level of detail, or it's too highly summarized for the needs of the user community. and any other impacts that are affecting the deployment. It's also very important to understand the operations, how things are maintained, as well as the data security requirements. So we have to understand like what's happening on a batch basis or a nightly basis, what is being scheduled versus event-based, what source control systems are in place in case there is a problem with the production asset. Are they using continual integration and deployment approach, or other technologies to help deploy their systems? And also security topics. So just understand anything related to the industry. Are they subject to ITAR restrictions? Are there data residency requirements or privacy requirements? They need to be reflected in the roadmap. How is security maintained, and are there any gaps that need to be discussed? And obviously some of these topics are a little bit sensitive. Replication requirements between different systems, and distribution requirements as well. Who do we have to connect to? Are they part of your network, or will be using emails or VPN, or what? How are we connecting to the users securely? Reviewing the BI usage and the history is also important. Looking at what tools historically have been used, whether it's BI or data warehouse, ETL, data science. What are the current versions? Are they current? Have they fallen behind? Are there functional gaps that could be met simply by upgrading systems, as is often the case? What are the successes and failures with the current deployment, things like that. So understanding the BI usage and history is important. What components have been used and well liked and regarded, and just get a sense of what's worked well for the user community, and maybe if there's any complete gaps. For example, maybe that traditionally they've always used reports and have never considered the idea of using cubes for self-service analysis. Or don't understand the use of dashboards versus a detailed report. Infrastructure. So many times BI solutions or ETL solutions suffer from being underpowered, and these are good opportunities to leverage cloud infrastructure, things like Data Factory and Azure or other technologies, to improve performance on a scalable basis. So going through and understanding what are the infrastructure challenges, where are the opportunities for improvement in the infrastructure itself. Also looking at single points of failure and comparing that to the requirement for high availability and fault tolerance is important. Looking for chronic issues, things that break, or security problems keep recurring that are becoming a nuisance. And other functional gaps, or if possible to review the logs from the call center or support desk to understand what kinds of problems end users are having. In terms of the topology of the infrastructure, if you're trying to get a sense of what a company has, you can start by looking at the regions, dev, UAT, production, DR, looking at the different environments that are required in terms of operating systems, security providers. Usually there'll be a way to get a diagram that conveys most of this information, at least with respect to analytics, and not necessarily all the source systems, so you understand what's in place, what you have to work with, and what are the requirements. If possible, if you can review the current system and look at the audit history, understand what's actually used, most common reports, and if possible, the behavior of the system. Is there a lot of delay, a lot of latency, or does it work really well? This will also give you a sense of what's most popular and the type of performance the system is producing. In terms of information management tools, it's very important to have high quality data. So we have to look at the ETL components. We see all kinds of different ways that companies handle access to information, things like backing up a source application through to classic data warehouse approaches, to data mart approaches, to data virtualization using technologies like Denodo, things like that. So there's a wide range of information management approaches and tools. So we have to understand what's being used, and are there any functional gaps that could be addressed either by using other features within the tool or other tools themselves. So looking at the data sources and what are the extraction methods for these is sort of the first step. Again, the team here would be your ETL or data management people, understanding how we get the information, what problems have been exposed during the extraction process, or if it's a new system, what feasibly could be done. So if it's a cloud system, is there an API, for example, that we could use? Or if it's a more of a mainframe type system, are there text file extracts that we could use, or challenges? For example, if it's a I-series and data stored in packed notation, do we have the ability to access the information that we need? So we go over the data integration, ETL methods, and look at the teams and the types of skills that they have. Look at the efficiency. Is the system batch-based when it should be real-time or event-based? Looking at the load times and other factors. And from here, we can go on to data governance and management topics. So here we can look at how our systems manage, what's the promotion process? Is there a proper data quality framework in place? Do we have identified stewards, data rules, policies, business rules, etc., and a sense of ownership of data and an understanding of what data quality problems might exist and what the cost of those are? If we don't, then that's an area that should be in the recommendations in the roadmap to improve the governance of the data itself. So we can go through and look at training. How is it conducted? If a user has initial training, does it sort of stop there? Or is there a path for them to continue learning? A lot of systems are deployed and then sort of abandoned because they sort of become stagnant. And there has to be a way that users can continue to be supported and to learn. So looking at the training approach is important. From these previous sections, you should have a pretty good understanding of what's actually happening in the business, so we can start to go through feature state planning. And again, these are some common goals, which are self-service, scalable infrastructure, governed, trusted data, developing appropriate analytics for the particular audience, and changing a company's culture to something that's a bit more data-centric. So these tasks can be balanced out between your business community and your information technology community. So some things are more suited to IT people, for example, maintaining security and infrastructure. And some are traditionally more suited to the business community, for example, coming up with ideas for dashboards, understanding business requirements, and things like that. We can document the opportunities for improvement. We can start looking at the short-term wins that have a high value and are attainable. We can look at the opportunities for longer-term improvements as well, and identify what are the key desired benefits that we want, business benefits, from the investment in time and money in the project. From here, we can lay out our longer-term strategy and a revision, so we can organize this into a series of work components. Identify the team that will be required, the sponsorship required, guidelines and recommendations. Other issues, common issues for discussion, challenges to modernization or previous successes or failures. People tried this in the past and failed. Are there budgetary or timeline issues, things like that? This is a good thing to review with your sponsor before producing your final recommendation. So in terms of the roadmap content, what we recommend are topics like this, where you have a review of your engagement, a glossary of any terms that you've used, some sort of an executive summary that shows what should be happening in the short term, medium term, long term. If you have a maturity model that you prefer, you can summarize what you think the current state is and what the recommendations would attain in the future. We look at our proposed timelines and look at the different blocks of work, what their outcome should be, and the business benefit from each of those. We can do a SWOT analysis, so strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which is a mix of internal and external factors that we need to consider when making plans for a given system. Some other topics you might want to consider looking at: a center of excellence, your approach to data governance. There should be a section that summarizes the data warehouse or information management approach, tool recommendations, any sort of history of key systems that is important for the reviewer, and I recommend also summarizing all of the key meetings that you've had. So I think that just about puts me at time. So again, these are just some of our recommendations for how to approach putting together the agenda for a roadmap and some of the key topics that you should have in the final product. So I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much, Mike. So we do have some questions coming through. What is the role in analytics in enabling digital transformation?
Well, I think that if you think broadly of analytics as seeing and understanding your data, it would cover all aspects of gathering data from source systems, collecting it into a usable and trustworthy format, and then deploying it out to the users that require it. So if you're trying to embark on a digital transformation, you're going to need access to all the information that you can in a trustworthy format, so that you can make decisions on what to do first, where to invest your time and resources, and what skills and technologies that you'll need.
Terrific, thank you. So I think we have time for one more question. Where do you go after you create a successful analytics roadmap?
So once you have a roadmap in place, usually there's a process of reviewing it with the sponsors. The important thing here is to have identified what content or what work effort should be done first, the sequence, the general cost, and what the business benefits are, so that the sponsors can sign off on the roadmap, at least initially, to start a particular engagement. So the key thing is to have a path forwards. I have worked with companies where they've spent time putting the roadmap together, but then because they're so busy, it becomes review, and they agree that generally that's what they should do, but they never get a particular sponsor to buy in and get the activity to start. So it's important really to have a path forwards, and that's why it's important to identify some key attainable goals that won't be too expensive for the company or too time consuming, so they can start to see that the roadmap will pay off if they continue with it and move from the current state to the desired future state. So making sure that that path is really clear, and making sure that it's something that's going to be able to get sponsored by the company, by the people you work with, or by a client in our case, in order for them to move forwards.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mike. We really appreciate you being here and for your presentation and your strategy and insights for our audience.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll be going to our next speaker now. I think it's loading. There you go. Yep, now we can see your screen. Perfect.
Cool. So sorry for these technical interruptions, and I'll begin. So good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is keeping safe, and welcome to this webinar session on driving digital transformation strategy. I am Anuj Katiyal, and I've been working as a data scientist for the last 2 years at Condé Nast, and I'll be talking about. So Condé Nast is a global mass media company, and for us, improving our content and social strategy is paramount to our growth. The machine learning solution, which I'll be talking about today, has led to an increase in around 70% increase in social traffic on a year-over-year basis. And I'll be talking and highlighting more about how we went about building this particular machine learning solution. So let's begin the show. Condé Nast is home to some of the most iconic brands in the world, like the New Yorker, Vogue, Pitchfork, and we touch 1 in 2 American households on a day-to-day basis with our mass journalism. On top of that, we also operate 32 global brands, and this is where being a data scientist becomes so much important, because it does not only provide us with an opportunity to work on problems for a particular brand, but we can also scale the problems and our learnings from not only one platform to all these platforms at a global level. Just looking at the scale that we deal with at Condé Nast, we have around 110 million monthly users to our various digital platforms. They access around 800 million pages on a monthly basis. And along with this scale, because we are a company which produces a lot of content, we, on average, on a monthly basis, release around 100,000 new pieces of content, but also revise a lot of older pieces of content on a regular basis. And this is where this digital scale makes it so imperative for our data team to better understand these user patterns, so that we can further lead to an increase in these particular page views, also improve on all our content workflows. And what I'll also be talking about is how improving our social strategies can also lead to an increase in all these numbers and drive more traffic to our digital platforms. So, what is our learning from a lot of content that we produce on a monthly basis? What we've observed is at a given time, around 20% of the content drives almost 80% of the traffic on our brand platforms. And why this is so important, this shows us that the better content we are able to discover at a particular time, which should be targeted towards our users, the more traffic we can drive to our platforms and more relevant traffic we will see to our brand platforms. And it becomes really important for us to have a good understanding of how our content behaves. Uh, Going forward, how we can also link this is we can link this to our social strategy, because we can use all the social media platforms available to further drive growth to our digital platforms and further drive traffic to our digital platforms by understanding what particular pieces of content can be posted on social platforms to drive more content to to our uh, to our brands, when to post some particular piece of content that it might drive a lot of traffic, what platforms to post what particular pieces of content on. It is really important that we do not overdo a lot of these particular pieces and maintain a proper cadence on our all the social platforms so that our brand is reaching to all the audiences. And further, once we do all this, we also want to track whatever we are doing well so that we can learn from we can learn from how the social media platform patterns, and we can also learn from our user behavior and better target our users with much more relevant content so that we can drive more traffic and more business growth for our platforms. So based on all these questions and all these problem statements, we went about two major problem statements which we thought would be great to focus on. The first problem statement was, can we predict how many page views a particular piece of content can see in the next few hours if uh, based on what is trending around, or if any particular piece of content has seen in the other question which we also tried to focus on, can we predict which particular pieces of content should be promoted on social media and when should they be promoted so that they can drive more traffic to our platforms. So in this particular presentation, I'll be more talking about how we focused on the second question here and sort of built a complete tool around our content understanding and our social strategies, and sort of combined all these things into a tool which helps our brands in the US and also which we are trying to expand to all the global brands to take advantage of a platform which we have built, and it's called Falcon, which is an AI machine learning solution, which is built with the goal of discovering trending content, what particular pieces of content are trending right now. It predicts for every particular piece of content how it is going to perform in the future. And based on that particular performance, it also recommends when to post something on social media platforms, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, or be it any other platform, so that we can drive more traffic and derive more business outcomes from this particular tool. So what were the main features which we wanted to build into this particular model? And this is where the strategy part becomes so important, because this particular tool combines our content strategy, where we want to discover much better content, because we know that from all our analysis, 20% of the content is driving 80% of the traffic. So we want to improve our understanding of the content, and for everything which is trending right now at any particular geographical location, we want to promote the most trending content on our websites and also on our social media platforms. The workflow. So with building of any particular machine learning or AI solution, it is really important for us to understand that who our end user is going to be. And in this case, our end user was going to be all our brand social media managers. So we had a lot of discussions about the tools the social media managers were using. And our aim here was not to change any of their workflows, but sort of to build all the technological solutions around it so that whatever tools they are using, our recommendations are directly served for them into their own tools. Editorial integrity becomes really important because based Condé Nast is a 100-year-old company, and we have been in this business for a long time, and we have a lot of SEO learning, search engine optimization learning from the last 10 years of social media. So we sat down with all the social media managers, all the SEO team managers, and based on all their learnings from how to best promote our content on social platforms, we built all these specific rules into the system so that how often should we promote some particular content, uh, uh, how to particularly block some pieces of content which might not be relevant for a particular social platform. So all these kind of features need to be built into the system to take care of the editorial integrity, which is an important feature built within Falcon. And the final thing was, with any particular tool you built, you should definitely have a business outcome, which for us is how to drive more traffic to our platform, which will improve the engagement of the users and also the number of clicks on our platform. So just giving a brief overview of how Falcon works. Falcon is monitoring the real-time trends. It monitors the traffic on all the brand websites. So just going into a bit of technical detail, we have a lot of Kafka streams streaming traffic all the time. And based on the traffic features which we built at a particular time, we find it based on the features we built at a particular time, we do the predictions, which is the second part. And once we do the predictions, all these predictions are directly sent to the tools which our social teams are using. Once the social team looks at all these predictions at the second point, they can look at all these predictions, see what is going to perform well, and schedule or optimize those particular posts to go out on social media. And how it becomes a loop is when they particularly post the pieces which we recommend on social media, we finally learn from the performance of those posts and we retrain our models based on these new data sets. And our model keeps on optimizing and we keep on improving the features of the model to sort of take care of the new trends which our users might be having as our platform keeps growing. So I'll just give a brief idea about the machine learning models and how the whole system works. So assuming we are at a particular hour T, like considering this particular hour, and I want to do the predictions. So assuming this is the Tth hour, I will, for any particular brand, I will look at the X hours prior to the T hours. This is the X hours prior to the T hours. And I look at the traffic on all my pieces of content in that particular time frame. And I'll build features on all these pieces of content that have been accessed in the last X hours to the current TSR. And what I'll try and predict is the number of traffic or the number of page views that's going to see in the next Y hours. And for every particular piece of content that has been accessed in the last X hours, the ones which are going to perform the best become our definite outcomes of the model for that given hour and are given as the predictions to go out on social media platforms. I'm not going much deeper into the machine learning models here, but the machine learning models are actually based on counterfactual machine learning algorithms, and it's based on the research paper which I've given a link here. And just talking briefly about how it works is we go to an earlier time frame and look at our log data, and we figure out all those instances of how some pieces of content have performed when they have been posted on social media. And it becomes a very imbalanced class problem because hardly 1% of the content is actually posted on social media and all the other content is not posted on social media. So You can apply any of the imbalance classification techniques to do it, but we have found amazing results using the counterfactual machine learning approaches. And currently, we are using this particular paper and the methodologies highlighted in this paper. Going ahead and showing the results, we have had amazing success. And in April 19th, we launched Falcon on just one brand in the US. But in April 2020, we have launched Falcon on all the brands. And on an year-over-year results comparison, we have improved our content discovery, and we are now posting around 33% more posts on our social platforms and maintaining a proper cadence while doing all these social posts. We have found an increase of around 70% of lift in the social traffic, which shows how good our system is in predicting all the current trends and giving you very relevant content outcomes. Also, more and more of our content is being discovered on our social platforms. And we have seen around 48% lift in engagement of the number of content pieces that have been accessed through these social platforms on our brand websites. Going ahead, these are further two metrics which show how powerful this particular platform which we have built is, where 68% increase in traffic to the older articles. So what generally happens in the life cycle of a particular piece of content is the new pieces of content are very relevant right now and see a lot of traffic, but there could be some older pieces of content which are also very relevant to what is trending right now. And our particular tool has improved the discovery of those pieces of content and led to an increase in around 68% of traffic for those pieces of content. Also, we also came up with another metric to track specifically our system, that when a particular piece of content goes live on social media, how does it perform in the first 48 hours? That is the time when a particular piece should be viral. And what we have found is within comparing it to last year, we have around 67% increase in the traffic seen by our pieces of content posted on social media in the first 48 hours of them going live. So just talking about where we are today, 80% of all Condé Nast US brands are on Falcon and using it for the Facebook platform. 1/3 of all social traffic driven to our websites is through Falcon recommendations. And this is like the main stat where 75% of all older content which sees traffic right now through social media is through Falcon, which has led to an increased discovery of our content. And content pieces also. How we are going forward with improving our systems, we are building Falcon and rolling it out for more platforms. We have started rolling it out for Twitter platform for all our brands in US right now. With a machine learning model, our aim is always to keep on tracking more and more signals and external events and figure out ways to improve our machine learning models. And this problem and the counterfactual learning approach is a very basic version of reinforcement learning algorithms. But we are also now exploring more and more reinforcement learning architectures where your action is if something should go live on social media platforms or not. And your reward functions could be how much traffic do they see in the next Y hours. So this is a particular problem which can be very easily framed into a reinforcement learning framework and can be solved using much better reinforcement learning algorithms, which is where we are working to improve our models in the future. And this is where I'll stop and I can take any of the questions that you have. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. So we do have a question from the audience, and it's how did this change the process of content creation? Do writers have to write with the algorithm or the predictive model in mind?
So we have a CRM system called Copilot, which all our editors use, and they do not interface with the machine learning models or algorithms in any particular way. What they specifically do is they just use their CRM systems. The data team is responsible for building all the models, for building all the API connections to the tools that they are using. And the social team, which finally has to figure out what should go live on social media at a given or at a particular time, we directly interface with them and sort of give them the recommendations in their workflow. So the people who are writing might not even know that Falcon exists, but so we are totally like independent of the people who are writing, but we directly interface with the social team who takes the content live on social platforms at any given time. So we do not affect the workflow of any content managers.
All right, awesome. Thank you. So we have time for one last question. Did the increase in traffic and virality also result in an increase in engagement from readers?
So we have calculated engagement in a few ways. It has led to an increase in the number of clicks. We have some of the other main ways in which we track is the number of sessions have increased, the number of page views have increased. Also, more and more content is being discovered and read. So we have had around 35% more URLs being accessed from social media platforms. And also the number of comments which we receive on our pieces of content have increased. And also the number of shares, which could be an important thing to see how people are engaging with our content on the Facebook pages. So these are some of the ways in which we calculate the engagement, and most of them have definitely increased. But given that Facebook had a lot of algorithm changes in 2018, and for all the brands which were publishing a lot of news content, they sort of limited how much of those will be shown to a particular user and sort of increase the number of friend posts on a particular user's workflow. This is always a challenge of how we can increase it. But what's great is after Falcon went live, we have now increased the number of engagement we used to see prior to 2018 when Facebook had not implemented all those changes. And we are now even performing better than how we were performing in 2018 before Facebook altered all those algorithms.
Awesome. And we do have one question asking if Falcon is being driven via microservices and Kubernetes in public cloud or on-prem.
So right now, our complete workflow is dependent on, we use AWS and we use Databricks a lot, but in the future, we might, once we start rolling it out at a global scale, we will be looking at all these particular solutions. But right now, we are focusing more on some EC2 instances and using Databricks to then the recommendations using the social tool APIs.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. Fantastic presentation. A lot of insightful information for our audiences, and we're really grateful to have you attend today.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Well, thank you everyone for attending yet another great webinar. Thank you again to our speakers for attending and all of the great information, insightful information that they gave today. We really appreciate it. Again, to see any past webinars or to learn more about our fall conference on September 29th and 30th, join us at bigdata-toronto.com. And thank you all again for attending.